Day 5 of the Australian Open, and it's finally happened. The all-American infiltration has happened, and I'm suddenly on the out. Blair, Henley, welcome to the tennis.
Thank you so much.
What state are you from?
I am from Florida, but currently live in Texas.
Okay, Levi, Huddleston, which state?
The opposite end. I'm in Washington State, or I was until I moved to Melbourne.
And Jill Craybas joining us on the tennis. Welcome, Jill, and your state?
I'm from the smallest state in the United States. I'm from Rhode Island.
Oh, really?
Yes, but I live in California.
Okay, well,
Yes.
We're covering a good geographical spread of your nation.
We are.
Victoria, Australia. Welcome everyone to the Spotlight today. We are going to have a look at a couple of interesting results from Day 5. We'll start with the women, and I loved watching this match. Two very good friends on court today out on Kia Arena. Emma Raducanu getting the job done 6-3, 7-5 against her good friend Amanda Anisimova. It was a battle of contrasting styles out there, Jill.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, Anisimova, first of all, it's very tough to play friends. And I think it's hard to block that out. But Anisimova is the type of player, she's deceptive, right? She's got that great length on the ball, hits a very clean ball striker. I wouldn't say they're hugely different because Raducanu is also a very strong baseliner, but she does have a little bit more shape. She can bring more variety. But I think this had to do with, Raducanu has mentioned in her post-season or her preseason that she's worked a lot on the fitness, which has been a huge impact for her. And I think just those little things, because that helps you feel more confident when you walk out into the court, knowing that you can last, that you can sustain and be better physically than your opponent. And I think that's been a huge mental boost for her, in my opinion. But this was always going to be a tough match. I mean, I think there's been a lot of tough matches, and this could have gone either way. I think Anisimova broke down a little bit as far as in the longer rallies, and I think Raducanu was just a little bit tougher in being able to stay in those longer rallies and the big moments.
Yeah, I was just going to say Amanda Anisimova, to me, has the ability to take the racket out of the opponent's hand, and you sort of saw that with the stats today. 39 winners, which is great, right? And then you see the unforced errors, which sat at 44 today. So really, I think what Emma Raducanu did so well was weather the storm. Sometimes when you play opponents like that, you just have to hang in there, wait for your opportunities, be patient, and this is a great sign for Raducanu. Potentially some back issues there in this match, so we'll see how she's feeling and what a test she has next.
Okay, Levi, we'll get to her next round opponent, but take us inside the numbers from today's win.
Yeah, it was interesting hearing your guys' perspective on the match because I think the stats really back that up quite a bit. So Raducanu actually sprinted twice as much as Anisimova at 28 versus 14. We do a little algorithm to say, okay, if you're above this threshold, that's a sprint. So she was moving really quickly, so that I think goes in with that fitness that she's been talking about. And then margin for error. She's hitting on average about 92 centimeters above the net versus her opponent who's at 47. So she just had a little bit more shape on that ball, really keeping the unforced errors down. You mentioned Anisimova's at 44. She was at 17. So I think it was just a little bit cleaner of a match. Although there were a lot of breaks of serves, it went both ways. Maybe the wind was affecting people out there. The ball toss range was about 50 centimeters, which is a lot higher than the benchmark. So it could have been that. Maybe it was the nerves of playing friends. Not sure, but those are kind of what the stats tell us.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
For the layman or laywoman in this case, what is the ball toss range just in terms of where the ball is peaking?
It would be where it's peaking, and then we tie it to the big toe of the non-dominant foot. And then we say, okay, what's that distance laterally? And so the spread was 50 centimeters. The other day, someone had a toss of about 16 centimeters. Peyton Stearns. And so it's quite a wide range. It's much higher than the benchmark. The benchmark's about 35. So to really have 50, it's like, I think the wind would have been kind of affecting the toss quite a bit.
And the wind, that makes sense that it would favor Raducanu with the variety that she can bring. I think she's just a little bit more stable, and when you're thrown different variables like that, I think Anisimova is going to like when everything's still, when everything feels more perfect, because I just feel like Raducanu can adapt a little bit better because of the extra shape that she can bring, the variety that she can bring. So I do think that was probably an advantage for her today.
Yeah. Before our second spotlight match, you did hint at it, Iga Swiatek in the next round. That is a completely different equation for Emma Raducanu, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good test, but she's going to be up for it. You know, she's been on that big stage before. I think it's always good if you can get the top players in the earlier rounds. Of course, now Swiatek has had a couple matches under her belt, so she's going to feel more comfortable as the tournament goes around. But she knows how dangerous Raducanu can be. It's just that if Raducanu's up for the task as far as how she's feeling her form, Blair mentioned, you know, the back could be an issue. She's still not maybe 100% physically as much as she's worked on her fitness to be ready for this and try and peak for this slam. But it's those moments that the adrenaline can kick in if you start playing well, if you start the match well. And the beginning is always important to get on top if you can at the beginning of a match. But I mean, for sure, mentally, she's going to be up for the task. I don't think she's going to be intimidated. I actually haven't seen Swiatek play yet this tournament, but I mean, she's always one of the favorites.
Blitzed it today against Shramkova. She did, yeah.
Yeah, that was impressive. And you know what? You can always, guys, I don't know if you know this about me yet, rely on me for the hair commentary.
Okay. What have you
Shout
got?
out to Amanda Anisimova. Dyed
Dark
her hair.
I know, saw
dark
that.
brown. And I saw her in the hallway and I was like, it looks really good. And she said it's taken me 10 years to get up the guts to do it. So 10 years later, Amanda, we love the brown hair.
Good on
like
it.
the blonde hair too, but love a change.
Levi, aside from a hair colour dyeing for Emma Raducanu, what else can she be bringing against Iga Swiatek in the next round?
Well, I think, yeah, the errors were pretty good today, but the consistency on the serve, she probably needs to keep those breaks down. Iga has an 89% win rate if she gets a break on that set. So if she gets that break early on, 89% of the time she's going to win that set. So that back and forth break that we saw today, crawling out, using that physicality, Iga's super physical, that's going to be tough. So I think really holding serve is going to be very important. Obviously, it's tennis, but if you get broken, Iga is going to take advantage.
Well, we've seen some big upsets so far in the first couple of rounds. Another one today, Hubi Hurkacz, the 18th seed, gone in straight sets at the hands of Miomir Kecmanovic. The scoreline 6-4, 6-4, 6-2. It was all over in less than 2 hours, Jill.
It was an incredible performance from Kecmanovic. I actually talked to one of my colleagues who commentated the whole match, and as good as Hubi is and his serve, he was actually broken in each set very early on, which I think surprised everybody because normally he comes out firing. But Kecmanovic was outstanding. I mean, he was playing so well throughout the whole match. I think he got to the semifinals of a tournament prior to come in here. I think that's very helpful when you have wins under your belt, you have matches under your belt. That gives you a lot of confidence coming in. That's also a matchup I don't think that would bother him that much off the ground in particular, because I feel like as soon as he was able to get some of these returns back in play and get into the rally, I think Hubi's ball, I think he would like. And so even though I'm surprised by the scoreline, it was straight sets, I think Kecmanovic has been playing outstanding throughout this whole beginning of the year so far.
And tough for Hubi, but it's so interesting coming into a season where he's changed his team.
Yeah.
He's got Masu and Lendl in his corner. He's changed his kit,
racket.
and he's changed his racket.
Yeah.
Everything is new, and I feel like it's been tough for him not to see some encouraging results right off the bat. He didn't have a spectacular United Cup and then comes here and runs into Kecmanovic, who, as you mentioned, he's a really good player. I don't think there's any shame in losing to Miomir. However, I think it's tough when you're trying all these new things. You're looking for maybe a slightly different path and things aren't quite clicking. And as you said, broken early, faced 11 break points. Miomir Kecmanovic only faced 2 and saved them both. And Hubi Hurkacz and Levi, I don't know if you can shed some light on this, but the ATP has these serve effectiveness stats that it puts into account several different factors. And Hubi Hurkacz was atop that stat for most of last year. So one of the best serves on tour. So that's amazing to see 11 break points faced from him.
Yeah, no. So last year we came up with all these biomechanics stats for the serve, and we looked at different aspects of the serve, how much you're bending your knees, how fast are your hips moving. And we looked at Hubi as someone to model after and say, okay, this is what good looks like. Now, how do the other players compare? So for sure, he's got a fantastic serve. He is at the top of the charts. I think Mpechi Pericard just eclipsed Zverev, but I think Hurkacz is either 3 or 4, and he was 2 a lot of the year. So a very great first serve. One thing I saw today was that his second serve let him down a little bit. So he hit 6 double faults, one on a break point. Like you mentioned, he was broken very early, often in all sets. And then the unforced errors were just a bit too high. I think he had 38 unforced errors. So
to 12.
38 to 12. So it wasn't a super clean match from Hubi, I think. But yeah, he didn't win points on his second serve. He was down about 17% from his average in terms of when he hits a second serve, is he winning that point? Down 17%. And if you look at the difference between Kecmanovic and Hubi, it's a 31% difference. So it's just a massive difference in terms of how easily they were able to hold their serve. On the Biomex stuff, we did take a look at the leg drive, which is how fast those hips are moving as you go up into your serve impact. And he was down 20% from the United Cup. So it just seemed like he was struggling a little bit on his serve to get that acceleration and to see his usual serve come out. And
just adding to what Blair was saying about everything new, I mean, these players in the off season is a time, they don't get a lot of time off, right? So it's a time to work on things, whether it's fitness, something in your stroke, some new shot that you're working on. So a lot of times, not a lot, but maybe occasionally at the beginning of the year, you might not see the results right away, right? Because it does take time. I mean, these players are working on things, they're trying to get better, and they're willing to use matches. Okay, yes, you want to peak for a slam, but they're willing to use matches to try and push them to a better level, and it might not happen right away. So I always gauge, not necessarily results right away at the beginning of the year. Yes, you might have some losses, but we know all these players are looking at long term. It's a process. And so I think we have to get a time because he's had new coaches, new voices in his head. He's trying new things. So I don't know. I kind of look at it from that perspective as well.
As a player, were you good at thinking big picture? Because I feel like it's really easy for the coaches to think big picture.
It's tough.
As a player, it's so hard.
It's very tough. And it just kind of like you train on the court all the time. You kind of have to train your mind a little bit too, not only to prep and be mentally strong, but to also try and have that mindset of having it be a process and not so result oriented all the time. But of course you want to win. But it's not the easiest thing, yes. But you hope to work on that all the time, yes.
All right, let's look ahead now to day 6 and a couple of interesting matches on the agenda. First of all, it'll be Paula Badosa, the women's 11th seed, who's come through against Wang Xinyu and Talia Gibson to reach the third round, against Marta Kostyuk, another seed, and she's come through via Nao Hibino and Julie Niemeyer. So this is a really interesting match in the third round, Blair.
I'm expecting some massive hitting, which I'm very excited about. But Paula Badosa, of course, the comeback player of the year last year, went from just inside the top 70 to inside the top 15. So good to see her back playing good tennis, looks physically healthy. She certainly showed that in her second round match. That was quite straightforward. And she's also beat Marta Kostyuk the last 3 times they've played a full match. She had a retirement, I think, a couple of years ago. So I think Paula Badosa on paper gets the win, but Marta Kostyuk plays really well in Australia. Of course, a quarterfinalist here last year. And
very popular too. Take us inside. What are the numbers telling you as a preview for this match, Levi?
As a preview, the win predictor is favoring about 2-1 in favor of Paula Badosa.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's quite favored towards her, but when you look at the head-to-head, I think that makes a lot of sense. But one thing that we did see from Kostyuk over the years, going back from, I think, 23 to 25, is she takes what we call hunting third shot forehand, but it's basically when you get that return, how often are you taking a forehand versus a backhand? And she's just slowly creeped up from like 62% to now 70%. So I think we can see her, being aggressive on that return or getting that return and then taking command. But Paula Badosa hits a really big ball. She's currently outside the top 10, but some of her stats don't look like it. Like she's eclipsing the top 10 benchmark in terms of speed. So she's hitting like 120 Ks on her forehand. So it's like you're saying, like it's going to be a slugfest out there. So it'll be a lot of fun to watch, I think.
First of all, I love the way these two play for different reasons. I love the way Paula Badosa hits the ball off the ground, heavy forehand, moves exceptionally well, stays so low to the ground. But they're very different, and she's a very consistent player, has a lot of power behind her shots. And Kostyuk, also, but a more all-around player. I love that she likes to attack, isn't afraid to come forward, and she's had that for years. And she's now just kind of come together. She has Sandra as her coach, who is very calm, is a very calm in presence in her box, and has brought so much to her, especially backing her. You have to trust your team and who's around you, and she loves having Sandra in her corner. But I don't know. This one, I'm surprised it's 2-1. This one's up in the air for me. They're both playing very good. As Blair mentioned, Kostyuk plays very good in Australia. So I don't know. This one's like a toss-up for me. I think it's like 50-50.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Model's not always right.
Can I add a fun fact to this conversation?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I have thoroughly enjoyed about watching Marta Kostyuk over the past year is seeing her with her daughter, her dog, Mander, who is a combination of her name, Marta, and if it were a girl, it would have been Mandra for Sandra, her coach. But it's a boy, so it's Mander. But I asked if she could bring Mander with her if he was here, and the dog has to have a 1-month quarantine to come to Australia, which I was not aware of.
You know, Johnny Depp learned that the hard way a few years ago.
Yeah, but never forget. Oh my gosh, yes. Well, unfortunately, no Mander around for Marta Kostyuk. She'll have to make do without.
Hopefully she can.
She's one of the best movers on the tour too, I think. Kostyuk,
Let's see if she can get Paula on a leash tomorrow on court. The other match.
Well done.
The other spotlight match for day 6 is the big one, Novak Djokovic, Tomas Machac. And this is a stacked quarter of the draw. But Novak's got to get through a real tricky 26th seed tomorrow, Jill.
Yeah, I think he's, you can't go against Djokovic hardly ever, right? I mean, he tends to find a way through in so many of these matches. What's interesting is lost a set in his first and second round. So hasn't looked like super sharp, I guess you could say, but the opponents played well. I mean, Badosa already played extremely well in the first round, as well as Faria. But Machac had a long 5-set match against Opelka. That was an epic. And how he turns up physically. I know he had to retire in the United Cup recently in Sydney, so that was a little bit tough for him. I mean, who knows? Sometimes you want to, if there's a little niggle, you want to make sure you're okay for the Australian Open and preparing to come here. But again, another situation where I think Machac knows he has nothing to lose. I mean, he's definitely going to go out swinging. And Djokovic knows that as well. But, I mean, he's the best, obviously, here in Australia, so it's hard to go against Novak.
I was looking at his stats, and there are some decreases that we've seen, like from 2023 to 2025. His first serve points won is just decreasing by maybe 5%. So he's maybe not as sharp as he was back in 2023. But, if you look on paper between all of the different metrics, serve in play, return in play, speeds, they favor Djokovic quite a bit in terms of his ability to just play the game well and consistently. But, I think Machac can hit a winner from anywhere on the court, and he can be very explosive. And I think maybe Djokovic's movement isn't quite what we've seen in the past. And so maybe there's a weakness there. But I think in general, in what the win predictor would say is it's going to be a Djokovic win. But we'll have to see, because Machac can execute. So. And
then there's the psychological battle as well. And these two probably are sort of poles apart in terms of their head game sometimes.
That's right, but Machac has done it before. He beat Djokovic in Geneva last year, obviously different service. But I did think it was interesting that scoreline was 6-4, love 6, 6-1. And that to me says that Machac didn't panic. And I think that is key against Novak Djokovic, because I think it's very possible to feel smothered by what he's able to do on the tennis court. But I love the narrative of this being a match between Machac, the self-professed short king, taking on the king of tennis in Novak Djokovic. Yeah, the headlines just write themselves, guys.
No, that's a royal headline right there. We look forward to that on day 6 among some cracking matches. Plenty to look forward to. Well, Blair, Jill, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Your
this is great.
Analysis and your gig insights as well. Thank you, Levi.
Thanks for having me.
To listen to this episode in full, just search for The Tennis wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube, to hit the bell button below to subscribe and never miss an episode of The Tennis throughout the tournament and throughout the year. And we'll see you tomorrow.